She raised the most famous family in the history of popular music, 9 children, dozens of grandchildren, a name recognized on every continent on Earth. But the woman the world called Katherine Jackson was not born with that name. She was not born with any of the names history attached to her. And buried inside her family line, going back through Alabama cotton fields, through a courthouse document that changes everything, through generations of deliberate omission, was a story that nobody told. Not because it was hidden on purpose, because the system that produced it made telling it nearly impossible. The science went looking anyway. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and let us know where you are watching from. Her birth name was not Catherine. It was not Screws, the name she carried into her marriage to Joseph Jackson in 1949, the name that became part of the most recognized family brand in entertainment history. She was born Catty B. Screws, May 4th, 1930, Clayton, Alabama, Barber County, a small house 10 miles from Rutherford in a part of the state that had been cotton and slavery territory for 100 years before her birth, and sharecropper country for 60 years after. Not a stage name, not a pen name, not a choice. Catty B. Screws. That was who she was. When she was 4 years old, her father, Prince Albert, made a decision. He changed the family surname from Screws to Screws. He changed his daughter's first name to Catherine Esther in a single act, without ceremony, without explanation, to a 4-year-old girl who would not have understood the weight of what was happening. He rewrote the family's identity. The name Screws was gone. Catherine Screws stepped into its place. She would carry that name for the rest of her life. She would pass a version of it to her children. She would watch those children become Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson and the rest of the most celebrated musical family on the planet. And she would never, as far as the public record shows, speak at length about the name she was born with or what her father was leaving behind when he erased it. That erasure was not an accident. It carries a meaning no document could fully deliver. To understand why, you have to go back further than Catherine. You have to go back to where the mystery begins and where the official record stops. There is a moment in every Black American family's genealogy where the paper trail ends. Not thinning out, not getting harder to follow. It ends completely, as if the family simply appeared out of nowhere, fully formed in 1870. That is the wall, not a metaphor, a structural historical fact. The 1870 United States Census was the first federal census to record every American by name, regardless of race. Before that year, for the entire history of the country up to that point, enslaved people were not recorded as people. They were recorded as property, numbers on a schedule, ages and genders alongside livestock and land values. No names, no families, no origins. Slavery did not just take freedom, it took lineage. It took names. It took the ability to answer the question that every human being eventually asks, where do I come from? The Screws family, Catherine's family, walked out of that silence into Barber County, Alabama, carrying names that were not entirely their own. Her grandfather, Prince Screws Sr., was born into slavery on an Alabama plantation. His existence before emancipation is not recorded as a person. The paper trail for him begins only when the law finally decided he was worth naming. What came before that moment, which tribe, which village, which specific region of Africa, which journey across the ocean, was rendered invisible by design. This was not negligence. This was not oversight. It was the intended outcome of a system that understood from the very beginning that erasing a people's history was one of the most effective tools of control ever devised. Catherine Jackson was born into that silence. She grew up in it. She survived polio at age 2, walked with a limp for the rest of her life, and moved north to Indiana during the Great Migration. She raised 9 children on a single income in a 2-bedroom house on 2300 Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana. She watched her children become global icons, and the silence came with her. It always does. The question is whether science could finally break it open. The research into Katherine Jackson's ancestry draws from two separate streams, and understanding the difference between them matters. The first is documentary genealogy, the painstaking work of moving backwards through census records, probate documents, Freedmen's Bureau filings, marriage certificates, and plantation estate records to trace a family line as far as the paper will allow. This is the work that tells you what was recorded. It has limits, severe ones. The wall at 1870 is real, and before that wall, the record was designed to erase rather than preserve. The second stream is genetic. Autosomal DNA testing examines inherited markers across all chromosomal lines, the full mosaic of ancestry, not just one direct line, and it can identify ethnic composition, migration patterns, and population-level origins with statistical probability. Mitochondrial DNA, passed unchanged from mother to daughter across every generation, traces the maternal line back thousands of years, further than any document can reach. These tools answer different questions. Documentary genealogy tells you what the system chose to write down. DNA tells you what the body carried, regardless of what any document chose to say. Together, they build a picture that neither could construct alone. What that picture reveals about the woman born Caddy B. Screws involves three discoveries. None of them are what the family had been told. The first thing the genealogical record confirms is the depth of Katherine's southern roots and how far back into American slavery they go. Her mother, Martha Upshaw, was born on December 14, 1907 in Russell County, Alabama, not far from Barber County. Same black belt soil, same cotton economy, same world. Martha's parents were Daniel Isham Upshaw and Janetta Brown, both from Alabama. Her grandparents, Isham Upshaw and Adeline Upshaw, lived through the pre-Civil War era. Before them, the record runs out. Not because the people disappeared, because the system stopped writing their names. 5 generations, all Alabama, all rooted in the strip of dark, fertile soil that had been the economic engine of the Confederacy, the Black Belt, named for the richness of the earth, but built entirely on the forced labor of people who were never permitted to own a single acre of it. This was not a family that arrived in the 20th century, not a great migration story that began only one generation back, not Caribbean ancestry or Ellis Island or a recent immigration. Katherine Jackson's maternal line had been on that land, as property, then as free people, then as sharecroppers, for longer than any of us have been alive. Her grandfather's grandfather, his grandfather before him, on that soil, in that system. The Upshaw family of Russell County, Alabama, was a family that cotton built and slavery held and emancipation released without any of the 40 acres or the mule or the apology. That is the foundation. It is not a footnote. It is the entire story. The second discovery is the one that requires the most honesty to tell. Katherine's ancestry, like the ancestry of the overwhelming majority of Black Americans whose families originate in the Deep South, carries European DNA, significant quantities of it. This is not surprising to geneticists. It is not a mystery to historians. It is the biological record of what happened on those plantations across generations. And it is a record that the descendants of enslaved people rarely chose to discuss openly, because the truth of how that European ancestry entered those bloodlines is not a truth that has ever been comfortable to say out loud. The world of an enslaved woman was bounded by the property line. Her movements were controlled. Her relationships were controlled. The men with consistent access to her were overwhelmingly the men who owned her or worked in proximity to those who did. The children born from those encounters were recorded in the census as Black. The fathers were rarely acknowledged. The law did not recognize the violence as violence because the victim had no legal standing as a person. Joseph Jackson confirmed this on the record in his own memoir. He stated that his great-grandmother, Mattie Daniel, born in 1864, was the result of an interracial encounter between a white plantation owner's daughter and an enslaved Black man. When Maddie was born, the white family considered abandoning the child. The fact that she was half white gave them pause. Eventually, she survived. Eventually, that bloodline reached Gary, Indiana, and then the whole world. On Catherine's side, the pattern is consistent with what DNA reveals across Deep South black families from the same region and era. European markers entered through the same mechanism. Not choice, not romance as it would be understood today, not equal partnership, through the system, through the property line that bounded every aspect of an enslaved woman's existence. The science made the general truth undeniable. The specific truth, which man, which generation, which plantation, remained sealed behind the wall. It was not a secret kept by the family. It was a secret kept by history itself. The third discovery is an absence, and absences in genealogy are often the most powerful reveals of all. For generations, the Jackson family carried a story about who they were. Joe Jackson stated publicly in his memoir and in interviews that his great-grandfather on the paternal side was a man named July, called Jack, who was born a member of the Choctaw tribe at the beginning of the 19th century, a medicine man, a scout for the U.S. Army, a free man who fell in love with an enslaved woman named Gina and who fathered a son named Israel, who became Nero, whose descendants eventually became the Jackson family of Gary, Indiana. It is a story full of specific detail, names, dates, places, skills passed down. It is the kind of story that does not feel invented, but DNA testing tells a different story. Genealogical research traced the paternal line not to Choctaw origins, but to a South Carolina plantation, to a French Huguenot slaveholder named James Joel Richborg, whose will in 1804 bequeathed an enslaved man named July to his daughter Mary. July took the surname Gale after Mary married Josiah Gale III. His DNA, tested through a direct male descendant named Thomas Jackson III, using Big Y 700 analysis through family tree DNA, matched not to Native American markers, but to a Richborg descendant still alive today. The family believed Jack Gale was born to a Native American father. The DNA said otherwise. He was with high probability the biological son of his French owner, not Choctaw. Not a medicine man born free into a tribe, the son of a plantation and the institution that ran it. Now on Catherine's side, the maternal side, accounts have circulated for decades that she carried Blackfoot Native American ancestry through her mother's line, unverified, not documented publicly. And in the context of what DNA repeatedly shows across the American South, it requires careful examination. Research consistently finds this. Across thousands of Black American families from the Deep South, claims of Native American ancestry are among the most common features of family oral history. Cherokee grandmothers, Blackfoot great-grandfathers, Native blood passed down as something to be acknowledged, sometimes quietly, sometimes with pride. And DNA testing, in case after case, has found no corresponding markers. Not because the families are lying, because the story arrived as an explanation for something real, for light skin, for straight hair, for high cheekbones, features that entered those families through a different mechanism entirely. European ancestry, acquired through plantation-era violence, was, for generations of Black families, too painful and too shameful to name directly. Native ancestry was safer, more dignified, less associated with what had been done to their female ancestors without consent. The story became true in the telling. It calcified across generations into family memory. The science is probabilities, not absolutes. It cannot categorically eliminate the possibility of a small Native American contribution somewhere in the Upshaw line. The Blackfoot, it should be noted, lived in Montana and Alberta, far from Russell County, Alabama. That geographic distance alone raises questions. What the genealogical and genetic record does make clear is this: no documented evidence supports the claim, and the pattern of family carrying a Native ancestry story that DNA does not confirm is not unique to the Jacksons. It is one of the most common phenomena in Black American genealogy. Not deception, not invention, a confluence of history, trauma, and the human need to find an explanation for things that are, at their root, too painful to name. What the mitochondrial DNA reveals about Katherine Jackson's deepest ancestry is the piece that puts everything else in context. Mitochondrial DNA is the maternal line. It passes unchanged from mother to daughter, generation after generation, carrying a genetic signature that has survived everything: the Middle Passage, the plantation, the sharecropper's field, the two-bedroom house in Gary. It cannot be falsified. It cannot be erased. It predates every document ever written about any member of this family. Katherine's maternal haplogroup traces to West and Central Africa, to populations that existed in that region long before the slave trade, before European contact, before the political borders that now divide the continent were drawn by people who had never set foot on its soil. These are among the oldest continuously occupied human territories on Earth. Africa is where the human species originated. The maternal lines running through sub-Saharan Africa are not the branches of the human family tree. They are the roots. The woman born Caddy B. Shrewsbuckles in a small house in Barber County, Alabama, was the woman who caught polio at age 2 and walked with a limp for the rest of her 94 years. She wanted to be a country singer and was told there was no place for black women in country music. She raised 9 children on a crane operator's salary in a 2-bedroom house on a street that would eventually be named after her family. That woman carried in her cells a signature connecting directly to the oldest human lineages on Earth. Not because she was exceptional, because the thread had never been cut. Slavery tried to sever it. The census wall tried to erase it. The name change in 1934 tried to start over from scratch. The mitochondrial line held anyway, quietly, without announcement, passed from Martha Upshaw to Katherine, from Katherine to her daughters, through every generation that came after. That is what DNA recovered, not drama, not a revelation that changes what anyone knew about Katherine Jackson the woman, but the impartial form of something that was always there, a lineage that predates every institution that ever tried to define or contain or erase the people who carried it. Here is what the research confirmed. Katherine Jackson descended from enslaved people in Alabama who were there before the Civil War, before emancipation, before the census bothered to record their names. Her European ancestry entered her bloodline through the system that held her ancestors, not through choice, not through partnership, but through the legal and economic machinery of slavery that made consent irrelevant. Her Native American ancestry, the Blackfoot story passed down through her mother's line, is a belief the family carried, and the DNA does not confirm. That absence does not diminish the people who believed it. It explains why they needed to believe it. Her father changed her name at age 4. His father had ancestors who could not choose their own names at all. The name Screws became Screws. Caddy became Katherine. A family rewrote itself quietly in the shadow of a history that had done the same thing to them for generations without asking permission. And yet the maternal line held, from an ancient West African origin point through the slave ships, through the plantations of Alabama's Black Belt, through the Great Migration to Indiana, through a 2-bedroom house and 9 children, who would change the world. The mitochondrial signature pass, mother to daughter, unbroken. The genome tells one story, the name tells another. Both of them are true. DNA reveals origin. It does not measure what a person survived to deliver that origin into the future. It does not weigh what it costs to raise 9 children in a system that was not built for them. It does not account for a woman who walked with a limp her entire life and still became the foundation of the most famous family in the history of popular music. The science recovered the bloodline. It cannot recover what carrying it costs. And here is the question that no haplogroup, no census record, and no DNA test can answer. The question belongs to you in the comments. When a family changes its name to survive, When a father renames his daughter at age 4 to give her a future that the old name might have closed off, is that erasure? Or is that the same survival instinct that carried the mitochondrial line through everything that came before?